The second is James Madison, who's considered the father of the Constitution. Like Washington, he's a Virginian. He was the youngest delegate. He's going to outlive all the rest of the 55. He's also the smallest. He was the note taker, the only one to keep a record of the convention for posterity. What's posterity? Future generations, you and me. Posterity, he says, will be indebted for the possession and the world for the example of the numerous innovations displayed in the American theater in favor of private rights and public happiness. Happily for America, happily we trust, for the whole human race, the founders of the nation pursued a new and more noble course. They accomplished a revolution which has no parallel in the annals of human society. They reared the fabrics of governments which have no model on the face of the globe. They formed the design of a great confederacy which it is incumbent on the successors, that's us, to improve and to perpetuate. Wow. The third, one more quote from Madison. The happy union of these states is a wonder. Their constitution is a miracle. Their example, the hope of liberty throughout the world. Okay, and now on to the third. Gouverneur Morris, a Pennsylvanian, famous for writing this. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure the domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty, upon ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Let's take a closer look at this preamble. It has three fundamental core ideas that are indispensable to an understanding of what is to follow. Okay, on the left, the Declaration of Independence. On the right, the first page of the United States Constitution. The first core idea is that there's a small u from the United States of America in the Declaration of Independence. And now, 11 years later, the U has been capitalized. Think about what that means. This is not a typo. In 11 years, we've gone from United States of America to United States of America. Obviously, you all know the pledge contains the same idea. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. No longer 13 individual states, but one nation, indivisible. The second core idea in that preamble I've highlighted here. It's the word posterity again. What's that mean? Future generations. So the founding fathers were not thinking only about themselves and their time. This means that their clear intent was to secure the blessings of liberty for you and for me. Think of it, everyone in this room, everyone in this country. The United, capital U, States of America. Now, the third is not so obvious, but it's a critical element to our understanding. The Constitution is a written document. Most 18th century Americans believed their rights to govern themselves would be much safer if they were just stated in plain language. That could be picked up and read, that government officials could see, that citizens would never forget, and as it turned out, that would be admired and imitated all over the world for centuries to come. The Constitution is in 6 sections, or articles, and it spells out the powers of the central government. There are 3 branches of government. The legislative enacts the laws, the executive has the power to enforce them, and the judicial interprets them. And although the term separation of powers does not appear in the Constitution, each branch has its own responsibilities, and if one threatens to become too powerful, then there's this system of checks and balances in place for the other two branches to block them. There's even two chambers in the Congress, a House of Representatives based on population and a Senate, so that the small states can have equal standing with the larger ones. So this is conflict resolution at its best. Okay, so the delegates compromised that summer on the makeup of Congress. And then over the course of July and August and into September, they agreed on the powers of the president, and they provided for an independent judiciary. But the signing of the Constitution on September 17th didn't really officially accomplish anything. Not yet. Those signatures did not make it legal, did not make it binding. Why? It needed to be ratified by the individual states. Remember, that's the core idea of the Declaration of Independence, consent of the governed. They needed the consent of the states. So what could have caused the missing delegates from our painting to walk out of the convention without signing off on the Constitution? As it turns out, many of them actually returned to their states to organize the opposition to the Constitution, and there were three rather famous ones, prominent delegates, who stayed through September 17th but then refused to sign it. One of them was Edmund Randolph. He was the governor of Virginia, kind of important. He criticized the Constitution for not defining Congress's power over the states clearly enough, and this is what he objected to. He objected to Article 6. It says in part that the Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land, and that the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, any laws of the state to the contrary notwithstanding. So in other words, if there's a conflict between the laws of the central government and the laws of the state has to submit or yield to the power of the federal government. Randolph wanted to know what the laws we were talking about. He wanted specifics before he was going to sign his name to anything that would limit the people's individual rights. And he was supported by another Virginian, George Mason, who insisted that what was needed was a Bill of Rights. Spell it out. Freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, and so on. Well, Mason was told that, this new government would only have the powers that the Constitution gave it. Infringing on freedom of speech was not one of those powers, so there wasn't any need to put it in the Constitution. Since the Constitution didn't deny freedom of speech or freedom of religion or of the press, it was unnecessary to include it in one of the provisions affirming them. In other words, Mason was told that it just didn't make sense to guarantee rights that Congress had no power to violate. Well, despite these assurances and the support of Washington, who's from Virginia, Virginia remained unconvinced. The vote was too close to call. The ratification process turned out to be extremely contentious. But Virginia finally yielded, and by just 10 votes out of 168, they approved the Constitution. New York, by just 3 votes. What won the day was that the state conventions were encouraged to go ahead and ratify the main body of the Constitution, and then they could attach suggested amendments that could be added later. Well, they did. They suggested 189 of them. Now, fortunately, James Madison whittled them down to 12, and then finally to 10. So that's the climax. That's the climax of our story right here, the Bill of Rights. Without these amendments, there's no resolution. There's no ratification. There's no Constitution.